Have you ever wondered what it would be like if Jesus were here on earth today and we could literally walk and talk with him just like the apostles did? Now, I remind you, we already know more about who he is than they did in the early days of the ministry. So with that fact in mind, how would you relate to him? If he were walking and talking with you today and you recognize that he is God, what difference would it make? That fact that he is God was borne out in Matthew chapter 1. Matthew talks about how this was the Lord speaking through a prophet, that he would be born and his name would be Immanuel, which means God with us. Furthermore, I think of John chapter 1, verse 14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And that doctrine that God became man was so important that over in the book of 2 John, John says, whoever doesn't accept this, that is, that Jesus came in the flesh, is the Antichrist. Wow, the Antichrist? If you don't believe that Jesus came in the flesh. Now, John wrote that because there were people in the first century who had great difficulty thinking of God in human form. All the way back to the Greek philosophers, there were people who said deity and the flesh cannot be mingled together. In the first century, there was a famous group called the Docetics who denied it. But there were several people, in addition to the Docetics, who just didn't understand that God could be in human flesh. And John thought it was important. If you don't accept it, you're Antichrist. I think of all the people that I've associated with who are Christians. I haven't ever known anyone who doubted that doctrine. We all accept it. Do we get the significance of it? Why did God have to become one of us? I think the writer of Hebrews answers that very plainly in chapter 1. Chapter 2 it is. Therefore, since he had to become like his brothers and sisters in every respect, so that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, to make atonement for the sins of the people, he had to become like us to die for us. Add verse 18. Because he was tested by what he suffered, he is able to help those who are being tested. We have a merciful and faithful high priest, but he could not have performed those very necessary services. He could not today had he not come in the flesh. And so it's important to believe it. I think it's important to see the significance. God became man in order for us to ever get to be with God. There's one more thought that I have for you in this regard. Be sure to marvel at him, to see his glory. You see it in his perfect life. You see it in his miracles. You see it in his teaching. Do you remember that time that some soldiers were sent to arrest him and bring him back before the Jewish court? They came back without him. And their explanation? No one ever talked the way this man talks. No, no one ever has. Today, walk with the Lord. He's not in the flesh, but he's here. And even today, behold his glory. Glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth.